All right, the Epstein files are finally out, and the details of what some of the most powerful people on the planet said under oath are, well, they're pretty shocking. We're going to break down exactly what was said. Let's get right into it.
To really understand the questions that are still hanging over this whole thing, we have to go back to August 10th, 2019. Picture this. Inside a federal jail, a prison guard is sitting just 15 feet away from Jeffrey Epstein's cell. Her only job is to check on him every 30 minutes. Simple, right?
But those checks didn't happen. Instead of walking those 15 feet, she does something else. Something really strange. At 5:52 in the morning, she gets on her government computer and types in a search. Latest on Epstein in jail. Kinda weird, considering her job was literally to be the latest on Epstein just by, looking.
And this, right here, is the moment at the very heart of the mystery. Just 38 minutes after she makes that search, Jeffrey Epstein is found dead. Now, when the Department of Justice asked her about it later, what did she say? "I don't remember doing that." And that non-answer has fueled years of questions. So all those questions have led us directly to this moment. Incredibly high-stakes depositions with some of the most powerful people in Epstein's orbit. And that brings us to Bill and Hillary Clinton, who were called to testify before the House Oversight Committee.
Hillary Clinton's deposition basically exploded into chaos just an hour in. What happened was a Republican representative took a picture of her while she was testifying and leaked it on social media. Her reaction was instant and furious. She stormed out, calling the whole thing a sham, before eventually coming back to finish.
The very next day, it was Bill Clinton's turn. And you have to understand, this was a historic moment. The first time a former president had testified before a congressional panel since Gerald Ford. He kicked things off by saying he wasn't there as a defendant, but as someone trying to help the victims finally get some closure.
So when they asked him about his relationship with Epstein, Clinton gave this really specific, kind of weird description. He said Epstein was like a vacuum cleaner, just constantly, relentlessly sucking up information about economics and politics. But Clinton said it always felt like he wasn't genuinely interested. It was just about collecting data.
And then, of course, came the questions everyone knew were coming. The flights on Epstein's infamous private jet. The committee brought up flight logs and photos showing young women on the plane during trips that Clinton took. So they asked him, who did you think these women were? Clinton's answer was pretty straightforward. He said he just assumed they were flight attendants. He even remembered one specific time getting a neck massage during a flight from a woman he thought was named Shantai Davies, who he figured was just part of the crew. He basically said he didn't think anything of it.
But this web, it stretches way beyond flights and depositions. It also gets tangled up in these mysterious deaths that have just fueled so much speculation. And that brings us to a man named Mark Middleton, a former Clinton aide they called the donor whisperer.
Now, Middleton was the aide who reportedly approved Epstein's 17 visits to the Clinton White House. In May 2022, he was found dead. The authorities ruled it a suicide, but the circumstances were so strange it just led a firestorm of online conspiracy theories. That hashtag Clinton body count was everywhere. And then his family hired Hillary Clinton's old law firm to seal the photos from the scene. When Bill Clinton was asked about it in his deposition, he just flatly denied knowing about any foul play.
But look, the Clintons are not the only political dynasty caught up in this, and not by a long shot. These newly released files also point to some really serious allegations and contradictions involving Donald Trump and his circle.
For instance, the files show this major contradiction with Howard Lutnick, who was a Trump appointee and also Epstein's former neighbor. So Lutnick is on a podcast claiming he cut all ties with Epstein way back in 2005. But then, boom, these new documents show that a decade later, in 2015, he allegedly invited Epstein to a fundraiser for Hillary Clinton.
But the most explosive stuff came out after NPR discovered that over 50 pages had been kept from the public at first. And those pages, they contained unverified FBI interviews with two accusers. One woman claimed that when she was 13 or 14, Epstein took her to Trump, who then forced her to perform oral sex. Another claimed that at age 13, Epstein introduced her to Trump at Mar-a-Lago and said this was a good one. The FBI did interview these women multiple times, but the file says one of them ultimately refused to cooperate.
And then, in this really surprising moment, Bill Clinton gets asked about Trump. He recalls this conversation from decades ago where Trump apparently brought up Epstein, saying they'd been friends but had a falling out over a real estate deal. So under oath, Bill Clinton basically provides an explanation for why Trump and Epstein's relationship ended.
So if there is one person, one single person who could connect all these dots, it's Ghislaine Maxwell. But when the House committee finally got her into a deposition, what they got was a complete and total wall of silence.
The committee came in loaded with the big questions. They wanted to know about everyone else involved, the 4 named co-conspirators and the 25 unindicted men that Maxwell had mentioned before.
But her answer, it was the same thing she would say over and over and over again for pretty much the entire deposition. She just kept invoking her Fifth Amendment right, keeping the identities of all those people a secret.
So they tried a different angle. They asked about another critical piece of evidence, the client lists. What lists are out there? Who is on them? It's the question the public has been screaming for an answer to for years.
And the response was exactly the same, a total shutdown. It really seemed like the whole thing was a dead end, just a flat-out refusal to cooperate. But then, there was one last, really unexpected twist.
Her lawyer made this absolutely stunning offer. He said that Maxwell was prepared to talk, to speak fully and honestly about everything, but only on one condition: a grant of clemency, which is a form of presidential pardon from President Trump. Turns out her silence has a price tag.
So, after all these depositions, all these document dumps, all these bombshells, what have we actually learned? It feels like we're just left with this tangled mess of connections, contradictions, and just a frustrating lack of any clear answers.
And that brings us right back to the central mysteries, doesn't it? Why did Clinton offer an alibi for his biggest political rival? What was that prison guard really doing minutes before Epstein died? Why were those explosive FBI files hidden at first? And will the one person who could answer everything ever actually talk?
And really, it all leaves us with one last kind of haunting question. When the people involved are this powerful and the secrets are this dark, is it even possible for the full truth to ever come out?